TGIF. What's new? Job prospects. Anybody get that funding for the business yet? Anybody figure out a new direction in life, career? Anybody change careers? Decide to? Spring break. Anybody going anywhere? You're going to Florida, right?
We're gonna Lake Tahoe.
You're going to Lake Tahoe.
Are you? What part are you staying in?
I'll be in South Lake Tahoe,
Okay.
California.
We're gonna be staying in like Reno, and then we're gonna be going, we might be going to North Star, Steve, but we're gonna go to more like local resorts out there. And then for half of them, we're staying in Sacramento.
Nice. I'll shoot you an email once I get up there. Well, I'm flying into LA to do some business first.
We just got snow.
Hmm?
We just got snow out there like yesterday.
I know, the weather's been crappy. So LA, Malibu, and Beverly Hills for a while. And then, Santa Barbara, you ever been to Big Sur? Okay, that's like going up Pacific Coast Highway, going up from LA like San Francisco. So going to Big Sur, Santa Barbara to skydive. It sucks, I was supposed to make it to Dubai. But, I'll save that for like after this semester. And San Francisco, and then end off in Tahoe.
Yeah.
And come back to Hawaii. Who else? Who's going somewhere?
Indianapolis, go across.
For the cross?
Yeah,
You been in Indianapolis before?
yeah.
I like it. I like Carmel.
Last time we didn't really spend like a lot of time there, but this time we'll be there for 3 days.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be a nice little short trip.
You driving?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a short drive. It's not that long. You like Carmel? Carmel's like that, kinda like the younger, modern, like.
We didn't like
city.
spend time right there.
You
Like,
have
it was
to.
just like for a quick game, stayed the night and like came back. So we didn't really do much.
Highly
in
recommend,
the
like,
town.
mention it to the people, be like, I wanna check out Carmel.
Okay.
Like, guarantee you'll go there every time you go to Indiana. Like, ton of bars, cool stuff. Who else?
I might go to New York, I might go to Guatemala, I don't know yet.
Between New York?
I fly standby, so.
Oh, okay, yeah, you got the hookup. And, you know, I still got, my cousin works for United Airlines, so sometimes if I just need a flight real quick and something happened, I get the flight too, standby. But if you miss your flight,
Yeah.
you know,
You're
if
kinda-
it's full or something, then you're kinda
Yeah,
sitting
I've
there.
gotten stranded in Dallas for like 3 days.
So it depends. But he has the hookup to where he can just buy me, tickets on the discount. So typically I'll fly first class or something, he can get this discount. Well, cool, you've been in New York, I take it?
Yeah,
Okay,
I have family there.
but no Guatemala?
Yeah, but I go all the time. I
Okay,
have
your-
family there too.
Your family's Guatemalan, okay. Who else? Where you going?
I'm going to New York too.
You going to New York?
Yeah.
Well,
Never been there, so
You never been?
yeah, I made that would say kid right down yeah.
Okay. Do you have like a schedule, like a plan, itinerary, like where you wanna
Or not
stop
really
at?
like
Or just
That's
you
all we
figure out
really
once you get there?
I mean I check the wrong bounce I guess, but alright. No,
Alright. I love New York. Oh, New York is awesome. But only certain parts of New York, just like Chicago. I don't, there's only like 4 neighborhoods in Chicago I like, the rest of them I don't like at all. And they're all like by a lake. So, you know, I live in the Gold Coast, I like the Gold Coast, Lakeview, Lincoln Park, maybe Wicker Park, Hyde Park I like, but everything else I like. New York, Upper East by the park, Central Park, you have to go up there, beautiful, beautiful.
remember that.
Yeah. Who else?
My parents are coming and we're going toward the East Coast, Washington, New York, Buffalo, Niagara Falls.
Niagara Falls?
Yeah.
Oh, you've never been?
No, I lived in New York when I was younger.
Okay, so it's by Buffalo. The better side is Canada.
Yeah, I've been also.
Yeah,
We're
so you
gonna
have to
go
see.
by the Canada side.
Yeah, you have to see the Canadian side, yeah. Who here has been to Niagara Falls? That's it? Canada side.
Sort of.
Hmm?
Sort of.
Sorta?
I've been on like the short, like where you see it on the American side, and then
Oh,
they
you
have
can
that
see it.
boat tour
Yeah.
that like takes you right up to the.
Oh, you
falls.
went on the boat tour?
Yeah.
Okay. Then that kinda counts.
Okay.
Did you go on the boat tour? Niagara Falls is amazing, like when you first walk up to it, but the thing is, on the Canada side, you could walk up to Horseshoe Fall, which is the gigantic one, like you could walk right up to it, and then you could go underneath the tunnel.
Oh.
Did you do the tunnel? I got footage of it, so maybe I'll show it or something. Like, it's amazing, like you could go underneath the falls, you know, so you could have it like coming over, like tunnels and like that, it's amazing. So I highly recommend it, Niagara Falls. Who else? Going somewhere? That's it? Alright, well, guys should try to take a break whenever you can. Take as many as you can, life is short. Alright, I think we maybe got one or two more people to come up here and talk about their breakdown. Ready to talk, share a little bit? You wanna email some, or you just wanna come here and just kinda talk about the activities?
The activities, I'm gonna break down.
Yeah, do you wanna email them for illustration, or you just wanna tell us the breakdown?
Well, it's not much, but I guess I can just.
Talk about it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so my site breakdown for Retromentor is very basic since I'm not that experienced with, running a website. I do know someone who does, and I'm trying to, contact him so he can like help me out a little bit because he's known for that. But so I basically had like 3 areas which were my main focus, and one is the actual people who work with the site, who actually do the programming and stuff like that, and the designers. And I wanted a bigger focus on people who actually function it rather than design it, because in my mind, I believe that designing isn't as intensive as the nitty-gritty, the programming itself, And then, you have the physical stuff like the buildings and the office and the hardware that would actually, keep the servers up, which is important, but not as intensive as something like, a product company where you would need like factories, a lot of storage and stuff. So it wouldn't be quite as intensive as that, so it's just not as expensive, just like an office maybe, and, some computers for the workers to use, and then people who work directly with the site and the customers and things like that, moderators and customer service, and that about sums up everything I have.
Alright, so you prioritize what's most important to getting it started, right? Just people to be able to monitor, control the site, make sure the servers are operating if the site doesn't work at all, right? And just implementation of the site, developing it, constructing it. Is that pretty much, okay. What do you think, that those 3 will pose the greatest challenges? Or will need to be adapted the most over time?
I think probably the way moderation might be handled, because when it comes to like a freelance place, I haven't had any experience on how those are monitored. I only know about like social media sites and stuff like that. So if I were to start it, I would probably take what I know about that, but it probably wouldn't be as applicable with a platform used more for work. So that's what I think I would change.
In some way, maybe LinkedIn would be maybe something closest of a social media site that represents that, right? But also think of this site we're talking about, right? Getting tutors and instructors to help people learn different things. That social media part probably would be a big part of your marketing, right? You think about LinkedIn, right? Before LinkedIn's now really technically a social media site, right? Before it used to be extremely professional, people weren't posting videos and comments and sharing this and that. But LinkedIn figured out very quickly, this is marketing, this is free marketing. You let your users do the marketing for you, right? You let them engage and talk about important ideas, or maybe the site itself, what could be better, what could be improved. Now you have free feedback, right? Feedback about where you need to change your site. It's right then and there coming from your consumer. So in some way, you observing social media sites probably huge to this idea, because that's the part that's actually gonna help it grow. Yeah, you have a basic platform to help try to better educate people or help them, tutor individuals who need some sort of help. But how are you gonna keep making it grow? You keep making it grow because you can see the information from the consumers about what needs to be changed and adapted on, new ideas and things like that. They're a huge part there, so don't skip on that. But any questions?
So, with your company, you mentioned that it's a bit more in freelance work, and, my question is, so is this company kind of more like the people facilitating, like these lessons? Because, I'm guessing, well, based on your structure, it's more focused on maintaining the site rather than having in-house, tutors, obviously.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate, you know, like, we're not gonna try to control too much how the tutors go about teaching, especially when it's, you know, less academic things, more hobby type things, you know. I think it's more appropriate to allow the teacher to teach how he wishes and, you know, let the students give their feedback, so, you know, even if they do end up not teaching so well, then, you know, other people can see that for themselves and avoid it from happening again.
Okay, so you're pretty much like the middleman for having these people be able to contact these, tutors, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I like how you mentioned that you'd like to focus more on the development and running of the site, making sure that it runs smoothly and like information is protected and all of that. But you did also mention that you weren't looking so much, or that design wasn't a main focus of your application. But do you see any potential issues with that? Because there are examples of, like, for example, Microsoft Edge. It basically beats out Google Chrome in every metric, like, of performance. But people still use Google, like, Chrome because it just looks nicer and it has a better, like, UI and everything. So, like, do you see a potential issue with, like, having a basic looking website, but one that runs well, or would you try to find a balance with that?
I guess I should rephrase what I meant there. When I mean, like, by focus, I guess I misworded what I meant. When I talk about design, I meant, like, I feel like something like programming, you know, that takes years to learn in some cases to do it very, very well. But when it comes to design, I feel like even customers can see, you know, they can look at a design and they can see what they do or don't like, or give feedback. So I feel like, not to dog on anybody who's into design, but I feel like it's something a bit easier to do functionally.
Which is, you know, you could be right in that sense, right? You could just say, hey, we take a pragmatic approach. We want people who are not concerned with that, but more concerned with the content of the instruction, right? Or level of competency of the instructors or tutors or whatever, right? They say design is maybe for another company, not for us right now. Great, which is good, which is knowing your product or knowing, any other questions? 10:40 says, thank you. Right, not everybody, can or should follow the lead of other companies, right? Sometimes it's good, but sometimes you don't differentiate, you just become another copycat, right? You just imitate, that's all you do. But sometimes, you know, consumers are looking for something a little bit different than was out there with the average platforms. And sometimes basic is better, right? Simplification is sometimes easier for people to get exactly what they're trying to find, right? Instead of too many colors, fonts, cool stuff, videos, all of this. So, but it's important just know what you wanna do, right? So your project is your project, you want it to be exactly how you wanna do it. But also think of maybe some things you could be missing in terms of getting more people, more demand. Remember we always say, hey, you take what you currently have and divide the pie, that's value to the company, right? You don't have to really change much, but just divide what you got. So you can say, hey, maybe I do divide to have a creative part, something that deals with all creative content instead of logical, English, mathematics, blah, blah, blah. You have that to be a whole nother place where people can subscribe to for a larger fee, some sort of alternate learning. Just things to consider, right? We're always looking for new things. Who else? Anybody else? Was anybody left out? That's pretty much it? All right. We're gonna try to wrap up project management today, which is interesting because part of the class is called project management. You're working currently on a project, right? So in itself, life is somewhat a project. We can say maybe life is a program full of mini projects, right? And the project has a definite start, a definite ending. Between the project are many activities. We know that real life happens. We have the picture in our head about what exactly it is we want to do. It all sounds great in our head. But now someone drops some money into our lap for the idea. They give us 500,000. They give us $1 million. They give us 10 million. Now we have to say, oh, it's real. How does this actually work? Who are the people we need to gather to make it work? What are the resources we need for technology, for equipment? What is the time frame in which this stuff needs to happen? Now you're on a schedule. Bank says, hey, we gave you $1 million, you have to pay us back every month this amount of money. And you're like, okay, how long does it actually take to get up and running on this project? I'm just using a business as an example. Right, so say your project is a business idea. Bank gives you the money, you say, okay, now I gotta get the people together, resources, equipment, technology, find a location, a physical location if you need that, website, all the resources that go into that. Now you're on a schedule, you gotta pay the bank back this money, right, on a monthly basis or some other schedule. How much time will it take for you to actually start making revenue, pay it back, right? How much time will it take you to start making a profit? We know on average, the first 5 years, 50% of small businesses fail. Within the first 5 years, 50% of small businesses fail. Half of all businesses fail. Right? You say, well, what's the case for that? What's the reason for that? It's probably a simple reason. People are just not creative, and they didn't plan appropriately, right? Because when we say the stuff we're tackling now has to deal with planning and growing at the same time, right? How do you filter processes, but how do you actually grow at the same time? So it's interesting. So think of your life this far. Your life is a project. So I asked you, what are a set of activities that you hope to provide an outcome at Concordia, right? Let's say you have a desired outcome. Your outcome is to graduate, right? And then I ask you, your start date. You're like, oh, I started here 3-4 years ago, yada, yada, yada. I say, okay, was this your only project you had in mind at that time? What would you say? What were some alternative solutions to come into school, come into college? Were there any other projects that you had in mind? Who else to say? but it deals with planning. You like, hey, okay, I graduated high school, now I have to plan. I'm still planning my life. What's the plan? Like what, how do you expect to get there? What do you think the end result's gonna be? So the thing it is, you say, hey, my plan was to come to Concordia. You say, I didn't get a scholarship. I paid the tuition. You say, how much tuition you pay with this plan? What is tuition here now a year? Just an approximation, I'm not having to be specific. Full-time, what's tuition?
I think 34,000. I think 34,000.
34,000? Anybody else? Agree, disagree?
Somewhere.
Alright, so think 34,000, we round it up, keep it simple, 35,000, right, $140,000. So we say, hey, we got a $140,000 plan, right? This is my plan. I'll execute, I go to class, I do the work, I try to get good grades, right? In hopes of a decent job, right? And so we say effectually, okay, we get the job, we get out, let's think, we project 60,000 a year, maybe realistically, it might be 45 a year, right? And you say, at what point does it actually break even to what you paid for college? At what point do you actually like be able, hey, I paid off the debt, and now I'm in the green, I'm no longer in the red. So I posed this question before we start the chapter, just to get you to think, like, hey, everything you do in life requires a strategy, it's a project. Everything you kind of take on is a set of activities that should have a beginning and an end, and you should adapt and change it over time, because real life happens, things come up, right? And so you're always trying to get to the optimum results. So here, let's just look, 140,000. Let's think of alternative methods. Hey, Professor Ross, I want to start a business. Hey, Professor Ross, I want to start a business from scratch. Like, hey, is that the only way, right? But you buy out a business that pre-exists. Right now, you're like, okay, that sounds interesting, but they all cost money, Professor Ross. All cost a lot of money. Not necessarily, right? Let's look. A franchise for Subway costs $15,000. Which means in essence you could buy 2 franchises for tuition at Concordia University a year. Right? Right, okay, I just order, instead of coming to class, I'll just have 2 Subways. Right? Instead of a year of Concordia. Hey, Krispy Kreme Dunkin' Donut, $12,500 to $25,000. Pizza Hut, $25,000 for a franchise. Cold Stone, anybody ever been to Cold Stone?
Yeah.
I don't see that many anymore, I think they're a failing company, but I haven't really looked. 27K, Ben and Jerry's, I don't see that many anymore too. I mean, they operate a lot of products, I just don't see the stores anymore. All right, Wendy's, there's one on Harlem and, what's that, Madison? 40K. So you think you, by the time you graduate, could have owned 4 Wendy's. Taco Bell, $45K. McDonald's, $45,000. KFC, Sonic, I don't see too many of them, so I probably wouldn't get into it. And my favorite of all time is my favorite coffee shop, Dunkin' Donuts. Now, here's a caveat of these, right? So I'm just showing you some very simplified math, but obviously the caveat is like, they want you to have X amount of net worth, blah, 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 right? But then you say, hey, that's not really a challenge too. Maybe I'll get a loan for something to show net worth on paper, right? Go get a loan just to show us I could buy multiple franchises. There's always a workaround. There's always a plan. Point is to show that, hey, what is your plan? Are you constantly revising it? Don't stay stagnant on your plan, right? Are you constantly growing and adapting to everything while you're in school? These are critical times. While you're in school, which means right now you have a ton of energy. When you go out, it's just not gonna happen. Right? So now you have a ton of mental energy, a lot of creativity. Just consider some alternatives out there. Not stop school, because you're about to graduate anyway, it doesn't matter at this point. But just thinking like, hey, there's always alternatives to what I'm doing, right? There's some stuff I'm missing. Not to get off topic, but I just wanted to show that. All right, project management, right? So what does a project encompass? Name some stuff. Project, what does it encompass? What are some things part of the project?
And no,
Okay, yeah, project needs an end goal. What is your objective? What's your goal? What else?
Starting point?
Starting point, beginning point, all right? Okay, we established that. What else?
Supplies.
Yeah, let's say supplies, right? For anything. It could be the smallest project on earth. You still need something to do it, right? What else?
Like activities, like what are exactly are you gonna do?
Yeah, you need the necessary steps to get towards the end goal. What else? What are some of the finite things within a project?
People, employees.
You need people, right? You need people involved. Could be just yourself, but it could be a bunch of other people too. What else?
time.
Absolutely, right? You say, hey, resources. Resources, one of them is time. What are some other resources?
Money.
Money, right? People are resources. What are the constraints to a project? What are some of the hurdles, the obstacles to a project? We say real life happens. Think of like construction companies, think of contractors, think about stuff like what stuff do they run into to be like, this didn't go as planned. We wanted to build this skyscraper in Chicago, was due to be built 5 years ago. It's still not complete. We started 10 years ago. Like, what are some of the hurdles?
Weather would play a big factor into it.
Yeah, okay, you can say environment, right? Environment's a huge factor. Something happens, something catastrophic happened. Maybe the weather patterns change. Maybe there's blizzards for the whole month of February. What else?
Legal issues? Legal issues?
Yeah, we say stuff dealing with the law, right? Things change, legislation changed, maybe some new regulations came on board, maybe somebody, an accident happened on the job, right? Workers' comp, people get sued, people get sick, right? Somebody died, real things happen over time. What else?
The economy, inflation.
Yeah, the economy tanked, and so the money, let's say, a constraint is budget, right? Most projects have a sort of budget, some sort of budget. And so you say, well, the money that was available is not as much as it was last year, or the money that was available before is no longer available, right? Maybe the people who are giving me the money say, you know what, we actually don't have it anymore. We're not able to give it out as much as we used to, or give it out in total. So now you're gonna have to work under some new constraints. Can you still get the project done with half of the money we originally promised? How would that happen? How would you say you're gonna get this project complete something happened with the money and now you only get half of the money. Well, tell me some stuff that will happen with the project.
Takes longer to finish.
Yeah, okay. They say the project may take a lot longer.
Like fire people.
Well, let's see, the people who may say no. We're not accepting that. You gotta get it still done. Right? What are some things you can present to them? We could say we could revise the project, right? So you see this oftentimes with large buildings, you're like, hey, here's the original design, 150 stories, tallest building in the world. By the time it's done, it's 70 stories. Like, what happened? I thought it was supposed to be. Well, we had to scale back, right? Things happened, economy got bad, labor laws changed, we were sourcing, cheap labor from Bangladesh, sourcing cheap labor from China. Somebody's tired today. Just let them be. If he's tired, he's tired. Things change. This is the point, right? As a project manager, and some of you may be, if you go out and get a job, you say one of the things you could become is a project manager. Awesome job. Because all you're really doing is organizing, managing people and resources, right? Keeping tabs on everything, refining projects, keeping the schedule, right? Utilizing the budget appropriately, figuring things out. So it's an awesome job to have because it changes all the time. So it's definitely a job that keeps you interested for some time. So projects have a life cycle, beginning and an end. And all the stuff in between, that's what we're gonna talk about today. All right, so we talked about project management, right? That's just basically managing the project, everything, organizing, come up with a systematic, phased approach to everything. Right, whereas a program, we say something large is in a project that encompasses a multitude of projects, right? So say here at Concordia University, they have a program, right? The program will encompass many courses in order to finish your business program, right? So you say, hey, maybe the projects are the courses themselves, right? We have to design these courses, we have to write instructors for these courses, textbooks, scheduling, time, number of students that we need within this course, right? But it's all part of a larger program, which could be, your MBA or your Bachelor's of Science, and yes.
How come, I just wanted to ask like a question about like project. How come like the Middle East and in particular like Dubai, they invest in like big projects like the Burj Khalifa and stuff, even though like they don't exactly have the same like capital or like pull as like America? Like what, is there like a difference in motivations or?
Well, okay, so we'll use Dubai as a classic example, right? So Dubai, what happened to Dubai is something that happened in Kuwait, something that happened in Saudi Arabia, right? And a host of other countries who are similar. They discovered oil, right? Big desert, and they discovered oil. They discovered some oil reserves underneath the desert that say, oh my gosh, this is some of the largest oil reserves ever, right? Well, what does that mean to the world? That basically means you have unlimited amount of resources. So Dubai has essentially unlimited amount of money, right, to do ridiculous building projects. And so you're saying, we don't have the motivation to do that stuff anymore. We did at one time, which was the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, when we built Empire State Building, Chrysler Building, John Hancock Center, downtown Chicago, Sears Tower. We don't have that type of motivation anymore, but those were times when we were booming, and also oil as well too, right? You think of Standard Oil and Rockefeller and stuff like that. So why Dubai does that? Dubai is doing that because it knows that its central form of revenue should be tourism. So essentially, Dubai is taking the model of Las Vegas and implementing it to be an adult, uber wealthy Las Vegas for the world. Right, so they're banking on that. So they're saying that all this capital, all this money we put into all these unique towers is gonna lead to us being a center of, luxury, wealthy playland for the rich, right? That's kind of what they're doing. So they're actually banking on the future. But they have unlimited resources to do it, just like Saudi Arabia essentially has unlimited resources to do a lot of things too. Right, which we countries see doing, this overscaling, overbuilding. Will it work in 20 years from now? I don't know. You know, maybe the buildings, we learned that through COVID, all these cool high rises with all these office buildings, if something bad will happen, 80% of the buildings are not occupied, maybe 90% of the buildings. And now you have just a barren wasteland of office buildings, where no one can use them anymore. So you're like, well, what happened to the landlords, the owners? They're losing a ton of money. I don't know, maybe they'll have to sell the building because they're not getting any more revenue. The same may happen with Dubai and all these other countries that are really scaling up. But essentially what they're doing is taking the American approach that we had a century ago. We did this 100 years ago. They're just now doing it now, right? They got some monies, all new money, emerging economies, BRIC nations, all of that. And now they're just trying to show off to, they're trying to compete to show like, hey, we are either the same or better than the US, right? But we did this 100 years ago with these towers and stuff. So it's not good. All right, so with projects, right, we define the scope, how big is it, what are the objectives, right? We select a project manager, a team of people. We have an organizational structure of what happened, of how it's gonna happen, which is part of our work breakdown structure, right? Develop a schedule, which will be coming up next, right? So think of, you guys will be working on Gantt charts. So you'll be working on prioritizing. So like, hey, that's where else I got on my work breakdown schedule. These are the activities with the different departments, these are my, but now we're gonna figure out to say what's most important, what's priority, or what takes precedence over the next thing. Right, so you're saying, hey, I'm planning a business. What are the most critical components and path to get to the end result I'm trying to get to? And you say, hey, Professor, I have to take out maybe half of this stuff. Because half of this stuff doesn't allow me because of the budget I may potentially have. It's not realistic. Analyzing cost-time trade-offs. Right, you're on a schedule, you're also on a budget that pertains to the schedule. You're gonna have to trade off some things. And assessing and analyzing some risks. Everything comes with risk, every activity comes with risk, right? So it's the activity is any smallest unit of work effort consuming both time and resources that you can schedule and control. And here's just a representation of a work breakdown schedule, which you guys always presented. But here they're talking about relocation of St. John's Hospital, right? So let's maybe think of it as Northwestern building a new hospital, right? Northwestern Hospital or North Shore Hospital. All right, their first level is organizing and site preparation, and also go physical facilities and infrastructure, right? The first thing is to plan and organize for a site. So say, hey, we gotta go out, let's observe some available land, figure out how many buildings we could put on this particular land, and how tall the buildings will be, what the infrastructure, how much parking is gonna be needed, right? What other facilities will need adjacent to these buildings. From that point, you're gonna select administrative staff, so your admin staff comes first, right? Because they're everybody that's gonna do the day-to-day tasks. That's the most critical component in terms of people, right? And then, so you finally select a site and you do a survey on the site. What can be built here? Not everything could be built on a piece of land, right? You need particular soil, bedrock has to be a certain level, certain density, et cetera, et cetera. Right? And then you select the medical equipment here. So you start building, and now you have selected the medical equipment that's gonna go inside the buildings. And final preparation of construction plans, and then bring utilities to the site. So you build the building, now you're putting plumbing, electric, AC, HVAC, all of that stuff. After everything's ready, now you interview the people. You need people to be hired to work as nurses, as doctors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? Now over here, we got past physical facilities and infrastructure, we got purchase and deliver the equipment, right? Construct the hospital, develop information systems, all the technology in it, install medical equipment, and train nurses and staff, right? So kind of two separate approaches. One's just more, I would say, refined than the next. Is you want to tap them on the shoulder? All right, so we got a network diagram, right, which is a visual representation that depicts the relationships between activities, what we call nodes and arcs, right, between activities, right? So we got critical path method, CPM, which is basically say what's most important, right? We know that sometimes we can skip a bunch of activities if there's a budget constraint of people or whatnot, but we know that what has to be done in order for this thing to be complete. There's some things that are necessary for a project to be done in order for it to be complete, right? And so we always focus on that critical path method with this one. Program evaluation and review technique, which is also known as PERT. And PERT is more just like a planning tool, right? It's kind of like, what's sort of like you can use software or some other planning tools to plan how you're gonna evaluate each step in activity. How you're gonna gauge each step in activity to see its importance. Let's get this one. All right, path, the sequence of activities between a project start and finish. So think of this, you could have a schedule in place, right? So you set your schedule in place. You say, hey, we could start early or we could start late on the schedule based on some things that may have happened. That will lead to either us finishing early or finishing late, right? Depending on the things that have taken place in between. So earlier start times, the earliest finish time of the immediate preceding activity. So when we're measuring activities that take place one after another in a sequence, we could look at our earliest start time. We could look at our earliest finish time, which is the activity's earliest start time plus its estimated duration. We could look at our latest finish time. All of this is to say is how realistic are we, right? Are we very ambitious that this can start at this date? Are we a little bit less ambitious that something can start at this date? Maybe we have 3 different start dates, right? And we say, okay, if this particular one happens in the middle, this is what we presume to happen for it to be finished, to complete itself. And then we got activity slack, which is the maximum length of time that an activity can be delayed without it delaying the entire project, right? So you want to give a little bit of slack to each activity as a just in case, right? Just in case it's gonna, it doesn't work out, you don't want it to hold up the entire project. But the point is to try to finish the project on time, right? No matter what. So you have to engage each activity and give a little bit of a buffer for each activity, just in case things go wrong. All right, then we also got project crashing, which is shortening and expediting some activities within a project to reduce overall project completion time and total project cost. Where have you seen this? Where have you seen people shortening the project because it got finished? Tell me some of the things that they do to do it.
Probably making the production process more efficient, like with the assembly line and the Ford plant.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's like a kind of a more detailed example of that. mean, a simple one is this, like, you go buy a house and be like, oh, they cheaped out on the molding, right? They cheaped out on the plumbing. You saw they like, cut corners, basically what I'm saying, right? So you be like, oh, we cut corners, why? Because we were on a budget, we were on a time schedule, yada, yada, yada. So we shortened or expedited some activities, in which case now the quality may suffer, but it doesn't matter. As a project manager, you did the job, right? You didn't do it to the standard of quality, but you did the job, you got it done at the time, right? They definitely might, you cut corners, you sped up some activities or you skipped some. All right, and then last but not least, we'll just talk about project costs, direct costs, indirect costs, and penalty costs. What could be some indirect costs of a project? Just thinking about that. What could be some indirect costs associated with a project? All right, think of legal stuff, right? We talked about this. Say legal stuff. Hey, something happened, somebody got sued in the process, right? Indirect costs, right? Something just happened. And so you say, well, this is what it would cost Mr. Client, Mr. and Mrs. Client. This is what this will cost under a normal circumstance. Normal stuff happening, this is what it will cost, right? But if something out of the ordinary happens in the midst of this project, we'll be penalized, right? And then we'll call that kind of penalty cost. Penalty cost would be like, hey, something really bad happened at this specific activity. Workers' comp, person hurt themselves, machine broke down, we have to buy a new one. Just something really bad happened, right? Therefore, we gotta pay for it, now we have to adjust the cost, right? In which case, now we may have to change the whole entire planning strategy. Maybe a few things have to be eliminated. Okay, so last but not least, normal time, normal costs, right? Normal conditions, just things that happen in normal conditions of life, right? Because things are uncertain during the duration of the project. Crash time is the shortest possible time to complete an activity, and crash cost is activity costs associated with crash time. So it means like if you have to speed up something really quick, there may be a higher cost of doing that, right? You may need a more intricate piece of machinery to get this done faster because we have to meet our time constraints, in which case that's gonna cost more money to do. Maybe you have to hire more people to get it done faster, right? We have 3 people working on it, now we can get 10 because it has to be done by next week, right? So that would be a crash cost. We'll end off there. I will have everything graded by next Wednesday. So everything should be graded before we go on spring break. But any other questions before we go? All right, no other questions. Have a great weekend. I'll see you on Monday.